Greetings, kindred. It is Thursday, meaning that it is time for us to discuss one of the many denizens of our world of darkness. I am Voivode Maquette, and this is our world of darkness. So, let's have a discussion. Get comfortable. Sit back and pour yourself a glass of something red. I was of two minds today, so I have red wine and iced tea, because I couldn't decide. And I went with it because today's the best day to not be decisive over things. Today's the day to not be able to explain what you're actually thinking. Today is the day that we discuss the lunatics of Clan Malkavian. Both are amazing. Anyway, so Clan Malkavian is the clan that most kindred find unassuming or dangerous. They're either pets or psychopaths. And that is an interesting place to sit when you're a Malkavian, especially when you are, well, a real Malkavian. Because unfortunately there are several different varieties. There are your Nod Malkavian, spelled G-A, or G-N-A, as if chewed on. Some individuals like to call them fishmalks. I've never, aside from online, I'd actually never heard them called fishmalks in my games, in the games that I had played in the past. They had always been called the Nod. And when I first heard about the Nod, I thought they were talking about scholars. I thought we were talking about Malkavians that had dedicated themselves to the pursuit of knowledge of Cain. Nodists, not chewed on. Now, there is a tradition in my game. I can't say my game. The games that I've played in the past, because there were a network of storytellers where all of the games tend to have been intertwined, even if they were years apart. Someone in the storyteller staff of the game that I was playing in at any given time had played in the original game from my city, and therefore traditions and house rules and curiosities, you might say, made their way into other people's games. Now, the tradition for the Nod Malkavian, and I found out very quickly on why they were called the Nod Malkavian, was for any other Malkavian in the room to kill them. That's it. The Malkavians had to root out the Nod. Now, in the Malkavian lore sheet of Cobweb, they do discuss sensing Malkavians when you walk into a room or when you walk into the vicinity. If there was a Malkavian, you knew they were there. That was a natural ability to all Malkavians in the games that I've played in the past. They were rooted out with a ping. If you were a Malkavian and you walked into the room and there was another Malkavian in the room that you'd never met before, the storyteller would discreetly go, ping. Or, in the point when we all had cell phones, eventually, he would text, ping. And that would signify the fact that there were, in fact, other Malkavians in the area. Other Malkavians that might end up being worth interacting with. Now, if a Nod Malkavian had been in the area, they would go pong. Which I know sounds a little ridiculous when you've got a little game of ping pong going on, but it served well because it insinuated that you could tell as a Malkavian that other Malkavian that it was in the room, you might not be able to identify them directly, but you knew they were there. That individual was not right. And those individuals would usually be the ones who would come into Elysium wearing footy pajamas and carrying around a teddy bear. And believe me, I've met Malkavians who wear footy pajamas and carry around a teddy bear, but there's usually a knife hidden inside that teddy bear, and the footy pajamas are usually taken off some victim. Now, with the way Clan Malkavian is, we need to look at what they are in the 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade. And there have been some changes. And if you think about what they are and who they are, you need to understand that where everybody believes that the Malkavian are mentally disturbed, that they have mental disorders, that they have derangements, it's not true. The Malkavians don't suffer from derangements due to the fact that they are the clan. The Malkavian tends to gain derangements in one of two fashions. One, the sire tends to choose a mentally deranged individual, someone already suffering, because it is the closest form of enlightenment that they could find that reflects what a Malkavian actually is going through. The second way is, over time, they develop derangements due to the fact that they are unable to communicate properly. Over time, their minds break because they have all of the answers but none of the questions. And the inability to actually give them to the people who need them. It's a sense of desperation, a sense of depression, anxiety that can only come from the lack of communication. And that is a Malkavian's derangement. Now, it might come into forms of depression, anxiety disorder, PTSD, lack of being able to have an inner monologue, things like that. Those are common. Schizophrenia. But in all truth, the bane of a Malkavian is the fact that they have all of the answers and are unable to tell anybody who actually needs it. It eventually judges them. Now, due to the fact that they have all of the answers for themselves, they tend to become very fanatic in the organizations that they belong to, be they Camarilla, Anarchs, or even the Sabbat. Or, in the case of individuals like Anatole, one of the most famous Malkavians of all time, his fanaticism came from his needing to purify souls before the coming of the Gehenna. He was obsessed with Gehenna, not an individual sect. Now, a fanaticism of a sect can cause the Malkavians to become even more dangerous to anybody outside of that sect, which is why they fit so well in the Camarilla. They become the foremost fighters of upholding the masquerade because they become obsessively compulsive to do so. A derangement wraps around the organization that they belong to. Now, picture that in the Anarch movement. They are going to become the poster child of the Anarchs. You probably would not be able to tell the difference between an Anarch Brujah and an Anarch Malkavian at first, until you realize that the Malkavian is a hell of a lot more fanatic than the Brujah ever could be. And that's saying something, and that's something that people don't understand, is that Malkavians are not just going to be sitting in the corner, sucking their thumb, rocking back and forth, and being an embarrassment. What you're doing is insulting mental illness if you're playing a Malkavian like that. Malkavians need to be completely understood. I've played deranged characters. I've played characters that have derangements. Almost all of my characters have had derangements. But V5 gives us the option of being able to play it without having the defined derangement that, say, Laws of the Night or the old editions of Vampire the Masquerade tabletop will allow us to have. Because there were strange little rules. That ticking is my rat. My rat is feeding. Hold on 1 second. Hey. Moon Moon, come here. This is Moon Moon. Moon Moon? Fire hazard. Fire hazard. Moon Moon is my rat. Moon has come to discuss Malkavians with us. So what is the Malkavian the Bane then, actually? Well, what the book says is afflicted by their lineage, all Malkavians are cursed with at least one type of mental derangement, depending on their history and the state of their mind at death. It doesn't exactly say that they are suffering from your atypical schizophrenia. They may experience delusions, visions, terrible clarity, or something entirely different. Visions and delusions are almost the exact same thing. It's your delusion is you see your world in a different way that other people don't see you. When the Malkavian suffers a bestial failure or a compulsion, their curse comes to the fore. Suffer a penalty equal to that of the character's bane severity to one category of dice pool, physical, social, or mental. Some mental issues are going to cause you to become completely unable to talk to other people. You're going to become a babbling mess. That's absolutely fine. That stops you from being able to communicate from what you need to say. Not being able to physically articulate yourself and do things that you need to do. To think clearly, to get the proper words to come out. These are all things that can affect your socials, your physicals, or your mentals. And this lasts for the entire scene. This is in addition to any penalty incurred by the compulsion. So when they suffer a compulsion, they suffer a boost in their clan bane as well as dealing with the compulsion itself. You and the storyteller decide the type of penalty and the exact nature of the character affliction during the character's creation. Okay, very cool. Now, that gives you a responsibility as both a storyteller and a player to work together and create the proper way your character deals with something. Hello, Moon. So, I think I've covered derangements enough because I don't want to completely envelop Clan Malkavian in derangements. I don't want to just discuss that. So, let's discuss that compulsion we just mentioned. By the book, it says that they suffer from delusions. This is a gift given to them by their antediluvian, by Malkav himself. They're extraordinary gifts running while the vampire experiences what might be truths or portents, but with others, what others call figments of imagination dredged up by hunger. While still functional, the vampire's mind and perceptions are skewed. They receive a 2 dice penalty to rolls involving dexterity, manipulation, and composure, and wits, as well as on rolls to resist terror frenzy for one scene. So they have to deal with that and their inability to actually articulate what they're talking about in one fashion or another. They're going to be dealing with some of the most horrible compulsion issues ever. Thank God compulsions are a rare thing to pop up. Now, keep in mind that your bane, your insanity, if you want to really call it that, I don't think they're insane. I call them heightened. They're enlightened. And some people just can't handle that sort of thing. No matter what compulsion you're suffering from, it could be a hunger compulsion, it could be a need to dominate, it could be a need to overthrow. All of those are going to be completely intertwined, not just your Malkavian compulsion. Now, Malkavians also stereotypically practice 3 different disciplines, just as every other clan. They practice auspex, which they use to see things that others cannot. The new way auspex is run is a perfect discipline for Clan Malkavian because you can get into things that you couldn't do with the other ones. I don't give a shit about aura perception a lot of the times when I'm playing a Malkavian, because your empathy is going to be something that's so damn high most of the time that you're not even going to bother using Auspex. Moon, what are you doing? Moon. Anyway. So, as I was saying, they also practice Dominate, which is an interesting little thing, which I will get into in a second. And they also carry Obfuscate. Now, Obfuscate can be used for all manner of pranks and tricks and stuff, but I don't want to get into the goofiness that Clan Malkavian. I want to get into the seriousness. As fanatics of any of the sects, they can make amazing spies, and they're completely overlooked in that fashion, and it's really sad, because we're used to seeing those babbling idiot Malkavians that actually are not even portrayed to a respectful way. Now, usually at this point, I will go into a discipline and I will read through the entire thing line by line. However, in this one, there's only one level of a discipline that I want to read, and that is the amalgam of Dominate mixed with the second level of Obfuscate. I want to discuss Dementation, because this is going to be a point of anger for a lot of people. And that is the fact that Dementation, which once was represented as a 5-level discipline throughout all of the different expansions and editions of Vampire the Masquerade, it has been reduced down to one individual level, an amalgam of Dominate and Obfuscate. Dementation, as the book says, this subtle power requires nothing more than casual conversation, as the vampire's insidious influence hides between the lines and inflections employed. The victim finds themselves increasingly agitated as their inner demons bubble to the surface, eventually drowning out all rhyme and reason. Cost: 1 rouse check per scene. Dice pool: manipulation plus dominate versus composure plus insight, which means if you're in a scene with an individual, and I would say a scene is a block time within a specific area where you're interacting with an individual, that is a scene. I would also go to the old rule of a scene or an hour, whichever ends first, due to the fact that you don't have to make another rouse check. You just continue to make your manipulation plus dominate checks after the first time. System: after engaging in conversation with a victim, the user can activate this power. For the duration of the scene, the user may attack a single individual each turn in manipulation plus dominate versus their composure plus intelligence conflict, causing superficial damage to willpower. A mortal who becomes impaired by this power experiences a nervous breakdown or psychotic break, the shape and nature of which depends on the personality and perhaps their blood resonance. A vampire that becomes impaired by the power must immediately succumb to a compulsion as chosen by the power's user. There's so many different compulsions. There's your clan compulsion, yes, but there's other compulsions. You're not stuck with the exact same thing every single time. And if we go to, is it 208, I believe? If we go to 208, yes. Your compulsions are hunger, dominance, harm, and paranoia. Paranoia is such a fun tool to use against individuals. Hunger, hunter and hunted, a vampire always needs to keep their eyes and ears peeled for trouble. With this compulsion, the need flares into a full-blown paranoia as the hunger reminds the blood of its vulnerability. The vampire tries to disengage from any perceived threat, suspecting anyone and anything Any action not taken towards that immediate end incurs a two dice penalty. The compulsion ends when the vampire has spent roughly an hour in a safe spot. A rooftop with good visibility, their haven, or buried deep underground. That is disgusting, and I think it is amazing. Now, let's see. If the user wants to affect multiple victims, they need to make separate rouse checks for each. Duration is seen. I can understand why people would be upset with the fact that Dementation has been taken down a notch, but I don't really think it has. I think it has found a disgustingly sick, covert way of doing things. This is a fun way of messing with the first level of Dementation, which is Passions, and Total Insanity, which is the last one at the same time. I can't imagine how many times I, playing a Malkavian, went, you know, I love my Dementation, and it makes sense for the character to have this, but I really wish I had Dominate, but I'm not allowed to have both. I'm allowed to have one or the other, and that's bullshit. And this fixes that, in my opinion, because this is everything that I would ever want to use Dementation for. Because some of the older levels of Dementation were not really something I really cared about. I wouldn't use it. I typically use the first and the last levels, and that was it. So, with that, we have to come into the idea of lore. Now, I don't remember where I got this. I don't remember if this was a homebrew lore situation or if this was something that's actually in the book somewhere, because after a long time of playing in as many games as I have that have decided to either deviate from the meta plot or not, there's the thought of, what about, wasn't there a deal with the Malkavians and the Ventru? Wasn't the payment of the Malkavians joining the Camarilla that they gave up Dementation, which is why the Malkavians in the Camarilla did not have it, and why the Malkavians in the Sabbat did. Why the Sabbat had that, as opposed to the Camarilla. And if the idea is, you don't learn Dementation and we'll teach you a different level of Dominate, well, then it just makes complete sense, because the other level 2 is Mesmerize. You can take Mesmerize instead of taking Dementation. Or in the V5 companion, there's that new one that was invented that is marked in Dominate, where where several of the other clans, I think it was mostly meant for the Tzimisce, but I read it and it seems very much something that I could see Clan Venture doing as well. I could see Malkavian doing that. Until 1998, when the Grand Prank happened, and all of a sudden they all had Dementation again. And that's all fine, and that's all good, and it sticks with the lore. They did join the Camarilla. They did sacrifice the practice of Dementation for a time, and then they didn't anymore. It doesn't change the story. It makes it easier. What is easier to believe? That an entire clan decided that they just were not going to study their one discipline that only they had, and they were just going to give it up and learn something else, and even if it is inherent in the blood, they're going to ignore it and they're going to learn something that counteracts, and then all of a sudden one day just pop and switch? Or does it make sense that they all had Dementation just lying in wait until it was time to show the Ventru, show the rest of the Camarilla they weren't fucking around? Anyway, I'm getting a little heated. Now, I was talking about the Nod Malkavians. I don't think I finished my thought. The Nod Malkavians in the games that I used to play, when a Malkavian came into a room and they noticed a Nod Malkavian, it was their duty at that point. It didn't matter what their humanity level was. It was time for that Malkavian to be returned to the greater number. And what they would do is they would eventually swarm it, kill it, and eat its brain. noting why they were known as the Nod Malkavians. Now, there's lots of different bloodlines and organizations within Malkavian, and there's no reason why those are not accessible now, the Knights, the Moon, and whatnot. There's no reason why those can't be there. But now, V5 has made that a little bit easier of an understanding. Now, also, my favorite NPC in the World of Darkness proper, in the Fall of Atlantis series, and he even has a card in the Jihad Eternal Struggle card game, is the Little Tailor of Prague. The first Tzimisce I ever played, I played his child, and he has Dementation. Well, guess what? The Tzimisce practice dominate now. It's not too out of left field to say that Tzimisce was able to get Dementation, because it's a vicissitude of the mind. So, my light has gone out. I think I've pretty much discussed everything that I want to discuss. It's a shorter video than typical. But you know what? I think that about handles Clan Malkavian, because I don't feel like dwelling on derangements, because I don't find them as deranged. I find them as enlightened. I find them as cursed to not being able to express what they need to express, and that will drive you fucking crazy. If you've ever had parents that don't listen to you, you'll understand what I mean. If you've ever had a significant other who doesn't quite understand what you're talking about, you're a fraction of the way to understanding what Clan Malkavian's actually going through. So, the light's out, which means I have to shut up. So, everyone, have a good evening. Consider Clan Malkavian. Drop a like. Subscribe. Give me a comment on what your thoughts on Malkavian are. I want to know who's playing Malkavian. How are they playing Malkavian? Are they sympathetic? Are they just pathetic? Or are they a force to be reckoned with in our world of darkness? I am Voivode Maquette. This has been our World of Darkness. And myself and Moon wish you a good evening. Good night.